Tonight we're here to learn a little bit about the history of Christmas in New England. We're going to enjoy this well-illustrated lecture, which traces the development of the celebration of Christmas from the time it was outlawed in the 17th century New England through the beginning of the 21st century, when all the trappings of a traditional Christmas were in place. Ken Turino is the manager of community partnerships and resource development at Historic New England. He has published several articles on the history of Christmas, and he has a book in development, and he speaks on this topic widely. So all 20 of us, let's give a big round of applause to Ken.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you all again for coming out on this evening. I work for an organization, Historic New England. How many of you are familiar with the organization? Okay, well, great. Do we have any members here?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. We are a membership-based organization, so thank you for being members. We rely on the support of our members. Historic New England, for those of you who don't know, is the largest regional heritage organization in all of America. We own 37 historic sites throughout 5 of the 6 New England states. We have an office in Vermont, and we're doing programs there. And speaking of programs, what we do is a combination of things like many museums. We have extensive school programs. That's our Pierce House in Dorchester. A house here on the right, we do walking tours, house tours, plant sales at our Lyman estate in Waltham, which is open year-round. And if you haven't been through the greenhouses, they're quite beautiful, especially in the winter. We also do things like car shows. So there's a wide variety of offerings from Historic New England. And I'm going to put in one more plug. The house that we opened most recently, 3 years ago, is our Eustis Estate in Milton, Massachusetts. It's this amazing Victorian structure you see here. Same family lived in it until we took it over about 5-6 years ago or so. And it's all decorated for the holidays, well into the first week of the new year. And it's quite spectacular. It sits on 80 acres that abut the Blue Hills, right off the highway. So if you have time this holiday season, I would urge you to see it. It's splendid all year round, and it is open all year round. So that's just a tiny bit of about Historic New England. If you want to learn more, go to our website, and we urge you to join. But tonight I'm going to be talking about the history of Christmas in New England. And I'm focusing in on New England. I should tell you, I've been working on this topic for over 30 years. You're going to hear sources from diaries, from letters, from newspapers. A lot of them will be from the North Shore, because I started this research when I was director of the Lynn Historical Society, and I was there for 14 years. So there's a lot of North Shore references, but I'm always looking for things, and I'm always changing it up. Now, I'm focusing in on New England, but let's not forget, there were other holiday traditions depending on where you were in early America. And this is a site I actually visited this fall, but here it is decorated for Christmas in New Mexico. Let's not forget that there were settlements in California in the 1500s, in New Mexico, and in Florida, which had with them Spanish Catholic Christmas traditions. But I'm going to focus in on New England, and I think you'll see a lot of the things that we consider today as part of the holiday celebrations and religious celebrations actually developed slowly over time. And I'm going to focus, though, I should tell you this too, I'm focusing on the secular. It's very hard to separate the religious and secular side, but maybe not so much as you might think. So let's go on and talk about Christmas in New England. Let's go step back and look at what the celebrations were like actually in England. The original settlers to New England were the Puritans, and they avoided the celebration of Christmas for 2 main reasons. Can anyone guess, there's a hint up there, what one of them might have been? Why did the Puritans avoid celebrating Christmas? Any guesses? All right, I'll tell you. One is that the Bible does not say December 25th was Christ's birthday. There is no designation for that. And they found the Church of England and English Christmas festivities excessive, like the mummers. And indeed, in England, these festivities were rowdy. They included exchanging gifts for goodwill, dancing, songs, begging, feasting, and lots of drinking. Christmas was an occasion when the social hierarchy itself was symbolically turned upside down in a gesture that inverted designated roles of gender, age, and class. Those near the bottom of the social order might act high and mighty. Men might dress like women, and women might dress and act like men, and be the lord of Misrule. This might be a beggar. Young people might imitate and mock their elders. A peasant might become lord of Misrule and mimic the authority of a real gentleman. Now, when the Puritans deposed the king and took over in England, the Puritan Parliament made a point of holding regular sessions each December 25th from 1644 through 1656, and did what it could to suppress the holiday, and they were largely successful there. Now, here in America, the Puritans, 1 year after settlement in 1621, and this is a later illustration showing Governor Bradford, found some of the colonists out, quote, gaming and reveling in the streets on December 25th, and he ordered them right back to work. In 1659, the General Court of Massachusetts outlawed the observance of Christmas in the colony, fining revelers 5 shillings. And why are they doing this? Because reveling did exist. And in looking at the original documents, I looked at court records, and I found, for example, in 1652 that 1662, William Hoare was presented for suffering tippling in his house by those who came to keep Christmas there. And this is one of the instances of many that I found in court records. Now, this ban was repealed in 1681 by the Massachusetts General Court because the monarchy was restored in England, and these laws were obnoxious to the government. I want to show you just a little bit of trivia here. Do all of you know where the old State House is on State Street in downtown Boston, the historic building on the Freedom Trail? This was the predecessor in the very first site, on that same site, and this is the townhouse. And the very first recorded Christmas services held in Boston took place here in 1686. Now, not everyone was against the celebration of Christmas. And this is a pamphlet from 1647 arguing for Christmas. And where the arrow, it says, is Christmas is sound and good. So this is arguing for celebrating. And I love this illustration. It's The Trial of Father Christmas. It's a book from 1686, and it mocks the Puritans who had suppressed Christmas. The Puritan jurors bore such names as Mr. Cold Kitchen, Mr. Give Little, and Mr. Hate Good. So, now the Puritans were highly successful in suppressing Christmas. It was still considered a regular work day in the colony during the 18th century, although services were held by certain denominations. In 1719, Judge Samuel Sewall cautioned,
New England man came hither to avoid anniversary days, the keeping of them, such as the 25th of December. How displeasing must it be to God, the giver of our time, to keep anniversary days, to play the fool with ourselves and others.
So that's a description of Christmas. Almanacs that same year, this is an almanac from 1719, were very popular in the colonies. But I point this one out because right around the holiday of Christmas, where the arrow it says very specifically, do not let your children and servants run too much abroad at night. And why are they putting that there? Because people were doing it. They were celebrating Christmas and getting abroad at night. Okay. And it wasn't just, in the greater Boston area. I found accounts as late as 1771 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which said, "No person or persons within the town of Portsmouth shall, on the evening or nights preceding the Christmas day, assemble in a riotous and tumultuous manner." Okay? So these laws were really on the books. But I want to now turn and talk about some of the earliest traditions that we do have here. And I'm showing you a broadside, which is another word for a poster that would have been put out. And remember I said the mummers, the Lord of Misrule, part of the celebration in England involved begging. And this tradition of begging, in a sense, is one of our oldest ones here in America. This poster was for newspaper boys. And they put it up at the Christmas, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. This is dated 1771. And the last stanza starts out, "Kind sirs, your generous bounty flow, few shillings on your lad bestow." So again, that begging, giving tips, tipping your newspaper boy, or when we had milkmen, same thing. That was part of the earliest tradition. Now, in the early 19th century, the population burgeoned, bringing with it more ethnically and religiously diverse people. The celebration depended upon your religious affiliation. Congregationalists, the descendants of the Puritans, continued to abstain from keeping Christmas. It was in the urban centers that the growing celebration can be seen. Only a small minority of people in rural areas kept Christmas until mid-century. Slowly, signs of the acceptance of the holiday emerge in Salem diarist Dr. William Bentley's writings. So here's what he wrote on December 25th, 1810, when he comments on the growing number of religious services. Quote, "Christmas has a public service in the morning from the English Episcopalians and in the evening from the Universalists. Our Congregational Church stands fast as they were from the beginning," meaning no celebration of Christmas. And that's in 1810. And the debate continued on keeping Christmas. It was discussed in sermons like this and in editorials in newspapers. An article that was in the Norwich Courier in Connecticut shows the changing attitude in New England. The article argues in favor of celebrating the day, stressing its religious importance. Now, I want you to listen very carefully to this, because within this flowery Victorian language, you will hear what the two major holidays were in the early Republic of America, and it wasn't Christmas. "When a period approaches so replete with the blessings to the world, it becomes a religious people to reflect upon the importance of its observation. Shall we, while we celebrate the birthday of heroes, and that in which our fathers shook off with gigantic energy the yoke placed upon us by a foreign power, suffer the period to pass unheeded and unnoticed?" So what were the two biggest holidays in early America? 4th of July, when we shook off, we shook off the yoke. That's one. And what's the other one? Washington's birthday. Those were the two biggest holidays in the early Republic. No Thanksgiving. That doesn't come. That's a whole separate lecture. Let's see. I want to then now go on and talk a little bit about another early tradition, and that has to do with greenery. And this is actually a Winslow Homer illustration. The selling of greenery actually becomes a big business. But in the first half of the 19th century, with certain denominations, you could find the custom of decorating churches with greenery, not houses. And that's why if you go to most of historic New England's early historic houses, they would never have been decorated. Joseph Lye, a Lynn shoemaker, mentions this in his diary for December 26, 1819. He writes, "The church was handsomely draped with green boughs the day previous to Christmas." An 1827 article explains the custom of holly in churches by stating, "Tradition says the first Christian church in Britain was built of boughs, because the monks built their temples in that manner, probably to imitate the temples of Saturn, which were always under the great oak. The great feast of Saturn, or the Saturnalia, was held in December. And as the oaks were then without leaves, monks obliged the people to bring in boughs and sprigs of evergreen. Now, the antiquity of the custom is reinforced in an article inviting citizens to a Christmas Eve and Christmas Day service at the Episcopal Church in 1837 with the enticement, the church, according to ancient custom on the festival, will be decorated with evergreens. And let me show you just a few illustrations of churches decorated. This is King's Chapel in downtown Boston in the if you know King's Chapel, in the mid-19th century, so about the 1850s, you see that. And here's a couple of others. This is on Skowhegan, Maine. A small publication, Christmas Eve for the pupils of the South Parish Sunday School, published in 1853 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, described the interior of a church as wreathed in evergreens and flowers, each pillar garlanded with flowers, interspersed with beautiful wreaths and covered with flowers surmounted by evergreen crosses. So the top image is St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Lynn, and the other one is another church in Maine that you can see. Now, diaries show that for December 25th, for most people, remained a working day well into the 19th century. Listen to what Joseph Lye was doing in his diary. He did know December 25th was Christmas, but this is what he wrote. Helped kill James Phillips' hog. His weight was 583. In afternoon, killed our hog. His weight, 435. He goes on to mention a marriage taking place that day, and then next year, a burial. These are not things that we normally associate with going on Christmas Day, but it was a regular work day for most people. Now, I want to go on. I was mentioning the fact greens were not found in houses until much later. I want you to look at these illustrations from the later part of the 19th century, second half, and just look at what little greenery there is. So, first churches in the earlier part of the 19th century, and then later by mid-century during the Civil War, you start having some greenery. But let's look at some other greenery, and that is the Christmas tree. I want to talk a little bit about that. What you're looking at now is the very first illustration we have of a Christmas tree in America. This sketch was done in the Pennsylvania countryside between 1812 and 1819 by John Lewis Krimmel. He was a German painter who had emigrated to the Philadelphia area. This is in the Winterthur Museum in Delaware's collection. So this is the very first image we have. Christmas trees, although promoted as a timeless tradition, were a relatively new tradition in Germany itself. Originally, they were a local custom in the late 18th century, and it was not until the 1830s that trees became a national practice. Their popularization in America was spread in magazines and books. The first, probably a German story published in a Boston Unitarian magazine, the Athenaeum, in 1820. It was by reading about Christmas trees, not by witnessing them, that Americans learned about the custom. So where then do Americans first see a tree? That would be at a church fair or a Sunday school. The image on the right is an illustration from a Sunday school, and this is a card for a Christmas festival from Lynn. So most people, this is where they saw it. Now, many of the fairs were sponsored by the Unitarians, who promoted the Christmas tree and the idea of Christmas in their publications. So one thing that's interesting is the Unitarians played a huge role in America in promoting it, and that was to get it away from being that kind of rowdy holiday which persisted in other parts of early America. And also, Boston being a publication center helped to spread the word out about Christmas traditions. And here you can see in this one, the Sabbath School is advertising, and this is from Middlebury, Vermont, where we have an affiliation. And they're advertising, you can see a Christmas tree here at this Sabbath School. Okay? And you can see a Christmas tree at this social hop. And I always wondered what a social hop is. I guess it kind of danced there. Now, these fairs where you saw the tree usually featured baked goods and handicrafts made by the ladies of the church for sale. Well, that is also one of our oldest traditions with us. We are just finishing up the season of the church fairs. My town had one like here. This is Nahat Mass. And here you see another view of it. Had two starting after Thanksgiving and the last one just last weekend. Now, these usually feature, besides baked goods and handicrafts made by the ladies for sale, some form of entertainment. And the entertainment didn't necessarily have to have a Christmas theme. One that I found was the Union as it will be after the rebellion is crushed and the chain of slavery is broken. Okay. Now I want to show you the first printed image of a Christmas tree that we have in America, published in Boston, 1836, as the front piece to The Stranger's Gift, a gift book. And I'll talk about gift books in a little bit. It was written by a German immigrant, Hermann Bochum. Okay? So I want you to look at these early trees here, and here, and here, a variant of that. These early trees were usually small, set atop a table, and decorated with toys, candy, fruit, ribbon, garlands, and candles. Now, I do have to mention, gifts were not wrapped. They were, in the 19th century, they were not wrapped. And you can see that here, even large gifts would be placed underneath on the table, unwrapped, or they would be hanging from a tree. There's another one, that one. Here's another one. All of those gifts would not have been wrapped. Joseph Kidder of Manchester, New Hampshire, wrote in his journal in 1851, "Though the tree was thought scarcely more than a day, yet it grew as if by magic, and bore fruit in abundance in its season. There were nearly 70 different articles suspended from its evergreen branches, making a very beautiful and attractive appearance." Okay. This image here helped also to popularize the Christmas tree. Anyone know who this couple is? Yeah. Queen Victoria, yes, and Prince Albert, her husband. Where was he from? Germany. Okay. So I want you to again look at the tree, tabletop. On the left here on this side, that one was the London Evening News in 1848, and then it comes over and is published in Godey's Lady's book in 1850. And they did, change his uniform around a little bit in the illustration. But this helped, again, to popularize the Christmas tree. This was not the first Christmas tree in England. Queen Charlotte, who was also a German, had one about 1800. But it was in magazines that people, again, learned about these. And the earliest ornaments included the lighting of the tree. Now, has anyone here ever seen a Christmas tree with real candles on it? Okay, where was that, ma'am?
It was in a museum in Chelmsford.
Really? They lit the candles in a museum?
Well,
Really?
they didn't light them, but they had the candles on it.
Oh, they didn't light them. Has anyone seen them lit? There's usually someone in the audience.
I don't remember where it was. It was a very short time.
Okay, well that's actually a good point. This is actually, my friends on Nahat are Austrian, and every year at Christmas, they light the candles, and those bursts, they actually put sparklers in the tree and light those off. Now, I have to tell you how this was done. Oftentimes, it would be in a closed room, the tree. The parents would light the candles, and look at how they were generally cut, a lot of spacing in between, as you see here. They were very fresh, and there would always be a pail of water or sand next to it. The parents would light the candles, open the doors, and the children would come in, and they would be lit for a while, not going constantly. So I was talking with a friend who was trying to do the tradition in Germany, and he stepped away. The tree was on his balcony, and it caught on fire and burnt down. So you do have to be very careful with it. You do. But I will tell you, it's magic. If you can ever have a chance to see one, it is pure magic. Now, the first ornaments would have been homemade. And again, it was the magazines of the day like this that gave you illustrations and like this on how to make them for your tree. It was only a bit later that you started getting the glass ornaments. And I wanted to show you how the candles would be clipped on the left. And these are the glass ornaments. Guess where they came from? Germany. There were whole villages devoted to making glass ornaments. And you did not buy sets in the early years. This is from the 1860s. They appear as imports. You would buy them individually. Okay? It's only later that we started buying sets. So that's a little bit about the Christmas tree and the ornamentation. And I want to talk about St. Nicholas. His feast day was December 6th, just a while ago. And he is perhaps the most popular secular Christmas symbol. He was readily accepted at a growing number of the church festivals I mentioned during the 1840s and 50s. He had first been introduced to Americans in New York as St. Nicholas, and was popularized by Washington Irving in his 1809 Knickerbocker's History of New York. Okay? And I want to show you, this is one of the earliest illustrations from 1821, the children's legend. It's 12 pages long, fully illustrated, and it has Santa Claus, and again, notice with his sleigh and his deer. And here's another image of Santa Claus. But it's really this gentleman, Clement Seymour, and his publication in 1848 that Santa Claus's place as uniquely American icon was ensured by the publication. Clement Seymour's An Account of a Visit from St. Nicholas. You're all familiar with that. This charming poem, written for his children, helped to popularize the image of St. Nicholas flying through the sky with reindeer on Christmas Eve, leaving presents for good boys and girls. This was popularized as an old Dutch tradition, but in reality, it was an invented tradition. The Knickerbockers, as they were called, which were really descendants of the Dutch, New York had been a center for rowdy Christmas celebrations for years, and this was their attempt to mitigate that and make it more of a family celebration. So let's look at St. Nicholas. This is an early painting in the New York Historical Society from 1837, and this image was widely distributed. It's woodcut from 1841 in a weekly New York paper, Brother Johnson. But look at these. Oh, I found this at the New York Antique Show when we had a display there several years ago, obviously copied from this. This was from a steamboat panel that was on a steamboat in the Hudson River. So in his poem, Moore managed to evoke the integration of the social classes in a scene of shared festivity where the poor posed no threat of rowdiness and gratefully accepted their place. Now, Kris Kringle, derivation of Christ child, is another name. This was more common in the mid-Atlantic region to use Kris Kringle. This is a piece of sheet music, 1845. Look at this Santa Claus. He's tall, he's blonde, he's got wavy hair, he doesn't have a beard, he's young, and he's playing a violin. The point of this, and look at this guy. This guy, to me, is really funny. He's being drawn by turkeys, not reindeer. And all those bottles, I think, are empty wine bottles. He looks rather soused to me, but that's my interpretation. The point I hope you're getting, and look at this. Santa Claus is not wearing red, and he's not so jolly here. There is no, in the early years, no set image of what Santa's supposed to look like. He can be young and tall, he can be short and plump, he can be stern, he can be wearing a blue cloak. Let me show you these illustrations. These are from the first book-length illustration that Clement Seymour released. Originally, the poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," was published anonymously, and he put his name on it later. He said in the poem, he looked like a peddler and a jolly old elf. And here, but everything's in place. We have them going down the chimney. We have the reindeer. You saw that in the earlier illustration. No mention of elves, but they start entering the picture. Elves were a staple, and that's what's pictured here, of Victorian literature. So they get kind of glommed on to Santa Claus. His visage is going to change over time. And here is a Thomas Nast illustration, famous cartoonist. This is the first one that he did in 1863. And he's going to continually to draw Santa Claus. This is Santa Claus with the big belly and Bo Peep, okay? Until you get here. And this is where it sort of gets set in stone. Santa Claus would lose his plebeian character and become large and jolly. And this is Thomas Nast's illustration of 1881. And everything we think about Santa is set. You know, the big cheeks, the beard, the big belly, jolly, smoking the pipe. So it all becomes established there. It was Thomas Nast that gave Santa a North Pole address. Does anyone want to guess where he lived before? This is from the Washington Irving book, which introduced Santa Claus. That's a good guess. But Spain. Why he left that warm climate for the North Pole, I don't know. Spain. I can't tell you why. I can just say, because I've read it, it's in the Washington Irving book. The decades from 1840 to 1870 saw Christmas become firmly established as the most popular holiday of the year. Quote, Christmas seems to be growing in favor with the people, began an advertisement in 1841. Although resistance to these developments still lingered, preaching at Lynn's First Methodist Episcopal Church in December 1843, the Reverend James Porter bemoaned that a holiday might be established. Listen to his description of Christmas. Of such days we have a few now, and sad days they are for morality. Instead of temperance and peace, there will be quarreling, fighting, and debauchery. Instead of righteousness, there will be sin. Instead of the triumph of heaven, there will be the triumph of hell. That's his description of Christmas. It might have been in response to this that the poet, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, wrote in his journal on December 25th, 1856, quote, not a very Merry Christmas. We are in a transition state here in New England. The old Puritan feeling prevents it from being a cheerful, hearty holiday, though every year makes it so. So he's saying it's slowly changing. I think that's the best summary I found about the attitude mid-century. Okay. A rowdy Christmas did not disappear. A domestic Santa did not obliterate other modes of celebrating the holiday, but a new view emerges which portrays Christmas as a family holiday. Christmas also, as a quote, has a tendency to refine the feelings and give domestic life a peculiar charm. It concentrates all our enjoyments in the domestic circle, and that's what you're seeing here and in these illustrations here. The caption for this read, Christmas is heralded as an occasion for mutual good feeling, family gatherings, and the exercise of those charities so blessed in the sight of heaven. And here you have the patriarchs of the family in the center, and then games going on, blind man's buff, and other people enjoying them, the whole family there together. Okay. Historian Stephen Nissenbaum wrote, quote, religion failed to transform Christmas from a season of misrule into a quieter pleasure. It was the religion of domesticity that would be represented at Christmas time. Okay. And it was during this period really that the attitude towards childhood changed. It became a special time. The central purpose of the family now was not only to provide for the instruction of children, and in the 18th century they were looked at as little adults, but now childhood was supposed to be a period of happiness. And yes. So even at mid-century, Christmas was still a work day. But as you can see here from Woodstock, Vermont, this was changing. In 1847, E. Warren Mudge recorded in his diary, quote, day more generally observed than usual. A large proportion of places, businesses, being closed by previous arrangement with the city, like this ad. So he's saying, isn't it strange? Stores are starting to close on Christmas Day. Businesses are closing. The first state for Christmas to become a official holiday was actually Alabama. New England waited a bit. Connecticut was the first in 1856. Massachusetts was second to the last, and Maine last in 1858. So from the 1840s on, Santa was no stranger. Besides a busy schedule attending church fairs, he could be found at numerous retail establishments as well. I found this from an 1849 ad, and quote, "The venerable old Santa Claus announces to his friends that he has concluded to take up his residency at the old curiosity shop during the Christmas and New Year holidays, where he would be happy to see any of his young friends and to furnish them with almost anything they might want, both useful and ornamental, at very low prices." So we talk about the commercialization of Christmas. I have to tell you that it was there from the beginning here in America. This is an ad from 1806. I love the ad with the cut of the rocking horse there. As the popularity of the holiday began to grow, businesses began advertising their wares as presents. The earliest advertisements referred just as much to New Year's. That was actually a bigger gift-giving day than Christmas. In the early advertisements, the seeds of the commercialization of the holiday were sown. Such holiday customs as the Christmas tree and Santa Claus, intimately connected as they both are with gift-giving, might not have flourished to the extent that they did without some kind of economic impetus. And that was the machine age, and that provided the momentum. For the first time, mass production of inexpensive goods brought large-scale consumption within the reach of the general public. Merchants were not slow to take advantage of the opportunities thereby presented to them, and these newspaper notices began to offer a huge variety of merchandise, and you can see that here, for both children and adults. And you can see references to books in some of these. The image on the right, a little faint, is actually something called a gift book, and I had mentioned one of those before. Books were on the cutting edge of a commercial Christmas, making up more than half of the earliest items advertised as Christmas gifts, writes historian Stephen Nissenbaum. Publishers came up with this new product, a gift book. And this is one of the earliest, the gift from 1840. No, this is 1826, excuse me. These books were designed for various age groups and could consist entirely of poetry. Others might be a compilation of stories, essays, some were humorous, and they were designed, though, specifically to be used as gifts, and this one's called the gifts. But they were not the only gifts. Annie Jenkins of Lynn recalled receiving this doll in the 1860s. Quote, "She was sitting under a big tree, laden with presents. What are the presents I had? I do not remember. The only of any importance was my beautiful dolly." And just to show you a couple of other things, this is a jumping jack that's in the collection of the Longfellow house, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's house, that was one of his children's. And here, this illustration, you can see a jumping jack. But I also want you to notice the Thomas Nast Santa Claus. What's he wearing? The Stars and Stripes. Right, the Stars and Stripes. That's right. Here we go. And here again, you can see that there was such a variety, sleds, skates. You could buy rattan furniture for gifts for adults. Everything was being advertised. Although New Year's Day continued to be mentioned, the major gift-giving day shifts to Christmas by the 1850s. And again, you see the variety of gifts. Now, we talk about our shopping today. Ella Lyman, from the Lyman estate, wrote in her journal, one of our properties, wrote in her journal on December 23rd, 1866, quote, "Off early this morning to buy Abby's cuckoo clock, afterwards to McCarthy's to buy greens, home to dinner, and directly out again to buy 14 more presents. Finished at last at 6:30, having bought 147 presents since Tuesday afternoon." That was 5 days. 5 days. So we think we're bad, right? It was there from the beginning. I love this. Christmas shopping involved planning not just for the presents, but for the holiday feast as well. And Santa's throwing a plum pudding down the chimney. I wonder if it gets cooked as it goes. Now, turkey, and you can see this is, I believe this is at Quincy Market, Faneuil Hall. Turkey seems to have secured a place as the roast of choice for Christmas Day. The success of the meal, however, could vary distinctly. In 1860, E. Warren Mudge's turkey was, quote, done to a nicety, while in 1863, it was very tough. And let me show you a few images. Well, here we have the turkey, but a few images of Christmas dinner. Notice the lack of decoration. This is the Day family from 1905 the Manny family from 1905 in Lynn. The only reason we know it's Christmas, two things. One, on the back in pencil, it says Christmas. But in the center, you can just make out the plum pudding. You can just make out the plum pudding there. Let's see. Betsy Brickett Clark of Plastow, New Hampshire noted, quote, we had a splendid dinner, turkeys, ducks, pudding, pies, fruit, etc. And let's contrast that with this family from Worcester and looking at their Christmas celebration, obviously a little bit fancier, and also notice much more decoration. And this is also from around that same time period, the early 20th century. Now, an amusing glimpse of the holiday, how the holiday was celebrated, can be found in newspapers of the day. I mentioned that. One magazine, Ingalls Home and Art magazine, featured art and needlework lessons, along with cooking and other household tips for the housewife with ample leisure time. Daunting, especially to the novice hostess, were the 3 full pages devoted to carving a turkey. And they began with this dire warning: let no lady embarrass the carver and herself by placing before him a fowl with joints so unyielding that every effort to separate them endangers the adjacent guests with an instantaneous visitation from His Majesty the turkey, and proclaim louder than words her unskillful cuisine. Yikes. Now, not everyone had turkey. Here we have a plum pudding. Phoebe Beattie Clark of Lynn, for her Christmas dinner of 1864, prepared chickens, roast lamb, plum pudding, and donuts. Okay. Now, children expected culinary treats in their stockings as well, and Clapp's Confectionery obliged with a large stock of sugar toys and confectionaries, shell barks, chestnuts, fresh baked peanuts with pears, apple, dates, and figs. Now, let's talk a little bit about those Christmas stockings. This is from that 1821 illustrated story before the famous "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." And you see there, Santa Claus is filling stockings. So stockings are part of the story early on. The hanging of stockings is an adaptation of a Dutch ritual. So here in America, people crafting how this holiday was going to be celebrated are pulling from creating traditions and pulling from different sources. This is the first illustrated "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," and you can barely make out those little stockings hanging there, but Clement C. Moore mentions those there. And he wrote that Santa filled all the stockings. And here is a Thomas Nast illustration of a very big stocking getting hung up and ready to be filled. Now, Rose Terry of Hartford, Connecticut, found in her stocking in 1834
a dollar bill, a quarter of a dollar, a book, and a paper of raisins. I think St. Nicholas was very generous.
Yes, I think so too. Here. This is a glass slide from the Newark Museum in 1875. In Portland, on December 25th, 1850, Anne Longfellow Pierce wrote to Mary Longfellow Greenleaf, "Santa Claus has done his mission in hen's room. The full stockings dangle at the bedside, ready for this, the dawn of the day when they're unveiling their loot. This is actually an ad. You could go to Sears and Roebuck and buy one already made up for 98 cents. And the one on the right is one in our collection at Historic New England. So we actually have one preserved that was not opened. Like this. Now, following the Christmas dinner, the tree and the presents, people often spent the evening attending a musical or theatrical presentation. And here you can see one that had a Christmas theme, and this is up in Woodstock, Vermont. Sometimes they had Christmas-related plays or music, but it was not always the case. Look at this one. This is what you would do. Christmas Day, you could go and see Honeymoon, or How to Rule a Wife, or Adopted Child. You know, none of these had Christmas themes, so not all of them did. Now, Yankee sensibilities here kept these affairs quiet, but in New York and Philadelphia, newspaper accounts show that more often than not that they were rowdy affairs. There are newspaper accounts of people literally, it's that tradition of begging, going to doors and pounding on them and demanding food, drink, and gifts, quote, money. And you might know the English song, I won't go until I get some, I won't go until I get some. That's what they're talking about. It's the begging. So that tradition, more in New York and Philadelphia, lasted. And here's a show that shows those elements of Misrule. This was Kris Kringle's rare show. This was set in Philadelphia, 1845. And you can see the kids all shoving, okay, Misrule. And the slide to the right, the very bottom corner on the left, there's a young girl crying. On the other side, there's a boy blowing a trumpet. These are, you know, fairly subtle, but showing you that this rowdiness. Has anyone here ever gone to the Mummers Parade in Philadelphia? Ever heard of it? Okay. It is the biggest drunk I have ever seen. Once was enough. It's still that tradition of rowdiness and drinking, and that continues there. Now, the outbreak of the Civil War did little to dampen the growing enthusiasm for Christmas. In 1861, this paper from Lynn wrote, notwithstanding the pressure of the times and the fact that the nation is deeply involved in a war for its existence, the people of this city, and we presume the same may be said of other places, seem to enjoy the Merry Christmas as much as ever. Away serving in the Massachusetts 9th Volunteers, soldier J.E. Hodgkins noted in his 1862 diary, "We are not forgotten. God has put it into the hearts of some kind ladies of Washington to look after us today, for which we are very thankful. They furnished a splendid dinner for us, to which we have done ample justice." And here again, you see the gifts that were being sent to the soldiers. Again, for the young boys, the Jack-in-the-Box there. And here, again, socks and books, things being sent to the soldiers by their family and other people. And that gets into the theme of helping others less fortunate than ourselves. And that was found in the late 19th century commentary on the holiday. Again, from Ingalls Home and Art magazine, to eat, drink, and be merry is not the real keeping of the season, the true spirit of Christmas, but to befriend others less fortunate than ourselves or less happily circumstanced, to make some real sacrifice, perchance, for the happiness of another. And faint though it may be, our Christmas a reflection of his pure, unselfish love to man, referring to Christ. So this shows that. And I want you to see the lady is dressed finely. She's carrying a gift with her horse. But if you look carefully at the little girls, they're in ragged clothes. One is in bare feet in the snow. So helping others less fortunate than ourselves. Charles Dickens helped to popularize that. You can see the rich man's Christmas with all the abundance and the children have much toys. The poor man's Christmas with very little there. And here, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And just a little bit of trivia. The first reading by Charles Dickens of A Christmas Carol in America took place in Boston. Anyone know where it was? Oh, someone just said it. Where? The Parker House, yes. And I actually went to a reading of the Christmas Carol at the Parker House this past Monday. It was a benefit for Rosie's Place. It was really, really fun. They do it every year. And let's show you this. Right. And a couple of other things that enter into it. And here you can see, this is another broadside or poster that I found where they talk about at the town hall, the Christmas party, the proceeds will go to feed the hungry and clothe the naked. Okay? Again, helping those. And Boston was a major abolitionist center for the freeing of enslaved people. And every year at Christmas they had a fair, and the money from those fairs was to go to the cause of helping to free enslaved people. So again, this is a big part. And you can see here in this from Woodstock that the chicken pie supper is for the poor children. So that's very much a part of the celebration. Now, two aspects of the Victorian holiday, Remembrance of the Poor, and increasingly elaborate displays and consumption existed side by side. Many did remember the poor, but that did not mean that there was no excessiveness at private celebrations. In 1903, schoolteacher Luther Atwood's son Joseph had, quote, about 30 presents at the tree exercises, he called them. And Atwood himself never personally ate so much or felt so uncomfortable. Yeah. Now, the 1870s saw a few new additions to the Christmas celebrations. And what you're looking at is the first Christmas card ever. And this was done in England, commissioned by Sir Henry Cole and designed by John Calcutt Horsey in 1843. And here is the very first American Christmas card. And this also has a Boston connection in that it was designed by a Boston. But I want you to look at this one. Here's virtually the same card, both from the 1850s. This one was done for a store, Pieces Variety Store in Temple of Fancy in 1851. So these are both very similar, and these are the very first two Christmas cards ever produced. This is in the Winterthur Museum in Delaware. But Boston plays another huge role. Louis Prang of Boston is generally credited with popularizing American Christmas cards consisting of simple floral designs with the inscription, Merry Christmas. Now I want you to look at these cards. These are about the size of your business cards, okay, so very small. Anything strike you as kind of different? It doesn't look like winter. It doesn't have things that we associate with Christmas. I must say, some of these images might have had symbolism for the Victorians, but they're not what we think of as Christmassy, right? Christmas cards, like with Santa, are going to evolve over time. Prang thought of his cards as works of art. And this is actually a bigger size with fringe. He found these did better. He employed major artists in New York and had competitions, although he was based in Boston. They often reflected their time and artistic movements. This is sort of in the style of our Eustace House, the aesthetic style. And he found, again, these did better. So Christmas cards are eventually going to evolve into the red and green Christmas bells traditions, but that is going to take time. And Christmas cards could be homemade. We own the Sarah Orne Jewett House in South Berwick. Sarah Orne Jewett was a regional author, and she actually, that's a picture of her house. She actually drew this and used that as her Christmas card in the late 19th century. Christmas cards reflect their time period. Okay, what decade was this done? 20s, yeah. See, you can tell by, again, they're reflecting the clothing. Yes, absolutely. And Christmas cards can be humorous. They can be fun. This is from, I think, the 1870s. You can see, 1970s, yes. Right. And also, photo Christmas cards become popular, like this. You might remember, they're still very popular today. These start in the early 20th century, but it's after World War II that they really take off. And that actually is me. And that I still have that Santa Claus on the fireplace. He went out a few weeks ago, so he's still around, and so am I. So photo Christmas cards adapt to technology. Okay, so they morph and change over time too, as you can see. Now let's just mention the Christmas letters. Another Thomas Nast illustration. Letters to Santa become popular in the 1870s. And if you look carefully, the very high stack on the left says letters from naughty children. And that small stack to his other side are letters from good boys and girls. So let's see how popular they were. This is one in the Longfellow House collection, which I think are very rare. These things don't usually last. But this is one in Historic New England's collection. And this was from Stephen Phillips of Chestnut Street when he was a little boy. And in this letter, his bad penmanship, he asks for an Indian costume and a carriage for his horse. Now, we own the Phillips house on Chestnut Street in Salem, which is open and you should check out. There is Stevie with his Indian costume, and you can see his carriage, which we still have in the collection, by the carriage house. So he must have been a good little boy to get what he wanted. But here on the top, those were letters to Santa Claus in Boston in 1959. On the right, those are from Maine, just to show you the popularity of letters to Santa. Now I want to go on and just mention briefly the poinsettia, because I haven't yet. The red crown plant was introduced from Mexico by Joel R. Poinsett, the first U.S. minister to Mexico in 1825 to 1829. He brings this back to the States after that time. And in the 1830s, you start seeing them in greenhouses, particularly in California. But if they're being grown out there, they have to get shipped out, and that means by train. So they don't really become popular until the 1870s, when you start seeing them in cities like Providence and New York City. Now, the later years, here's another consider. The later years of the 19th century saw the elaboration and adapting of existing holiday trends. The use of larger Christmas trees, floor to ceiling, become very popular. Here's one. This is actually belonged to the Upton family when they owned the House of Seven Gables in Salem. And I'm on the board there, and they actually recreate this tree, and you can see it now at the House of Seven Gables. But so floor to ceiling, so that's a change. And Christmas presents were not wrapped. I don't know if you remember that woman in red bringing the gift to the young children. Just plain paper and a piece of string. Christmas gifts were not wrapped in the 19th century. Remember I said originally they were just under the trees when I showed you those early illustrations. By the late 19th century, you'd have simple plain paper wrapping. But again, New England plays a role in that. The Dennison Company of Massachusetts and Maine started creating stickers, which were first used in department stores, then whole boxes, and then the wrapping paper that you see. So that becomes really more popular in the beginning of the 20th century. Okay, I just have to check one thing. Okay, so Christmas is going to adapt to technology. With the invention and growing use of electricity, adaptations were made. Instead of candles on your tree, now you could have these electric lights. Lights were one of the first manufactured items tailored especially to Christmas. And, Santa adapts to technology. He gets a phone call, you can call Santa. Now, Santa Claus starts appearing earlier and more frequently in the season. So I have a question and I have a prize. for you. This is Windows in the Past, published by Historic New England. It's a book on all of our properties, save one, the newest. Beautiful picture book. And please raise your hand so I can give it to the right person. Something big happens to Santa Claus in 1899. I've not mentioned this person before. Raise your hand if you think you know what happened to Santa Claus in 1899.
Was it the Coca-Cola?
Good guess, but no. Good guess, yes. He got married. There you go. Sorry. Did you know that too? Sorry. Oh, I'll do it first. Well, I say he got married because Massachusetts author Catherine Lee Bates of Falmouth, Massachusetts, creates the character Mrs. Santa Claus in her booklet, Goody Santa Claus. Goody Santa Claus. So I say he got married, but that's the first mention we have of a Mrs. Claus involved, right? So outdoor displays grow more extensive. The first national Christmas tree was done by a New Englander, president in 1923. Anyone know who that might have been? Calvin Coolidge. He does the first national Christmas tree. Here we have one on Boston Common in the 1930s. As did the decorating of shop windows as Christmas moved out of the domestic circle and became more of a public celebration. So these public trees, Christmas Now. Here is Macy's famous mechanized Christmas windows from 1884. And I'm sure many of you remember windows in department stores, maybe from Boston. People still look forward to them. Speaking of Boston, here we have Jordan Marsh, which had wonderful windows. They also had the Enchanted Village. Does anyone remember that? Okay. There you go. It's now in Jordan's Furniture, and I will tell you, here's the old one. You could go and meet Santa Claus, right? That's me again with my crying brother, Warren, at Jordan Marsh. And here it is today, fully restored. It is beautiful. If you have not been, I would say it's well worth a trip there. It's something to see. This is in Avon at, help me, where is it? Jordan's Furniture. Yeah. And it really is spectacular. So in the 20th century, the commercialization of the holiday seems to be growing, and the selling of the holiday seems to be coming earlier every year. Santa Claus was co-opted by manufacturers to appear as a salesman. You mentioned the Coca-Cola, there you go. But not just that, Fannie Farmers or cigarettes, you know. So the commercialization is really happening earlier, you know. You probably remember this. It was Halloween, and I was already seeing Christmas things in the stores and decorations. And as you know, a few years ago, stores started opening up on Thanksgiving Day. You know, that's all changed. And now you also have the online sales, right? Black Friday we went through, Cyber Monday, all of that. You can do so much more online, as you can see here, with purchasing those things. So a couple other little changes. The earliest fake Christmas trees, artificial trees, were guessed from where? In doubt, Germany. In doubt, yes. Okay, you got it. Is it okay? Okay. They were made out of these artificial trees were made from ostrich feathers. Okay, that one is made out of ostrich feathers. 1890s. You might remember these. Yes, the artificial Christmas trees were not manufactured in the U.S. until after the 1900, and the earliest ones were from the Adish Brush Company, which created the first artificial trees using the same machinery that made their toilet brushes. Now, these are from the 50s, and you remember these, and 60s with the rotating lights, yes. And these fake trees. That is another picture of me with my uncle's fake white tree, the artificial tree that you see there. Okay. So, the tradition of helping others who are less fortunate continues. I think these are really not being used much. Do you agree? The Christmas seals? So some things, fall away, but I remember these distinctly. But of course, you still have the Salvation Army, which started actually in England. And yes, that is who you think it might be. Yes, it is. The Salvation Army was founded in London in 1865. Now, there's still going to be some additions in the 20th century. This guy makes his first appearance in a Montgomery Ward booklet, which was a gift to customers in 1940, right? And it later became a popular song by Gene Autry. Exactly. Gene Autry popularized the song. That's absolutely right. Now, many towns have their own traditions with decorating their houses. This is Lexington in 1923, and this is Tewksbury today. Okay? So, and that is Tewksbury. So, you can see the changes, yes. And many communities have their celebrations. My town this Saturday will have a Santa parade. And it's with the fire trucks, and it's great fun, and they throw off candy. So I'll be there in the evening. It's just great fun. I've been up to Woodstock to do this talk, and they have an amazing wassail weekend with craft shops. You're nodding. Yeah, have you been? Every year. Isn't it fun? It is so fun. Woodstock, Vermont. They have plays, there's music, there's this wonderful parade, there are shops and food. It is just so much fun. And of course, in Kennebunk, Santa's going to come on a lobster boat, right? And of course, your Christmas tree is going to be lobster traps, right? All those. And other, there are other things. Some of you might be doing this weekend. It's coming up. This is going to be Santa's Social going on with. Do you all know about this?
No.
Oh well, go to your website. It's on your town site. So you can go for a ride on a wagon. There'll be a roaring fire with Santa and a horse-drawn ride back. And yeah, it should be. Sounds like fun to me. So check it out. So every community seems to have their holiday events and all. And one of my favorites, and this is, I promise, the last picture of me that I'm going to show you, is the Santa Speedo Run. That's me in the middle. Yeah, right. I wish. Yeah, but this I just happened upon one weekend when I was when I was walking downtown on Newbury Street. This started in the year 2000 with 5 guys, and now over 400 men and women have raised over $1.6 million for needy children. Okay, so again, what's that?
They just had one.
Yeah, it was last weekend. Good thing it wasn't today. So, I could talk about so much more. There are food traditions, there are music. I didn't even get onto that. What I can say is that I hope in this presentation that you could see how Christmas has adapted and changed over time. And in our century, it is going to continue to adapt and change over time. Santa's not immune to change. This was in the paper a few years ago. We're all watching our weight. So I'm going to end now with a quote from an 1877 newspaper that seems to capture the feeling we have for the holiday even to this day. The observance of Christmas has become so universal in this country now that the day is regarded as the holiday of the year. Thanksgiving Day has had to succumb in importance to the festival, and even the glorious 4th has taken a back seat when compared with the 25th of December. Christmas is the day in which mirth and revelry is to be crowned as king and queen. So raise your Christmas trees. Hang up your fairest of wreaths. Sing your merriest songs. Brush away all dark clouds. Let in the sunshine. Beckoning happiness in at the front window while unhappiness is bowed out of the back door. And in a word, Let all do everything in their power to make for themselves and others a Merry Christmas. And let me wish you all a Merry Christmas. Thank you.